All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this committee the whole meeting of the Arlington Heights Village Board to order on Monday, September 12, 2022, and ask if you would all please rise and join the Village Board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Bertucci?
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Here.
Trustee Grasse?
Here.
Trustee Scaletta?
Here.
Trustee Baldino?
Here.
Trustee Canty?
Here.
Trustee LaBedz?
Here.
President Hayes?
Here. There we go. I think the microphones are on now. Well, let me just start by apologizing for the mix-up in the start time of tonight's meeting. Some of our communications said 7, some other communications said 7:30. So rather than start at 7 and have people upset with us when they missed the first half hour of the meeting, we decided to wait until 7:30. So thank you for your patience, and we will certainly proceed in an expeditious manner going forward here this evening. I also wanted to publicly thank President Pro Tem Robin LaBedz for running the meeting in my absence last week. I heard it went very well. Thank you, Robin.
You're welcome anytime.
And,
but not too often.
All right, thanks. And now next, to start the meeting itself, let me congratulate our undefeated and first place Chicago Bears on a great start to the season under very difficult conditions yesterday. We're off to a great start as well with the redevelopment of Arlington Park. But just like we know that there's a long way to go in the NFL season, there is a long way to go on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to redevelop 326 acres of prime real estate within the village of Arlington Heights. From day one, the village board's goal with the redevelopment of the property has been to ensure that it is put to its highest and best use and in a way that is befitting of the legacy of Arlington Park. I'm confident that we are on our way to doing just that. We will not be making any decisions here tonight or taking any votes, but we wanted to more formally update our community on where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going in the process, and what our role has been to this point. To be sure, we don't own the property, and we're not a party to any contract. We've not been negotiating with the Bears. We have, however, been actively involved in the process in our role assisting the Bears organization with completing their due diligence. Rest assured that the community will have many, many opportunities to provide input before any votes are taken, and that the Village Board's ultimate goal is to ensure that any redevelopment of the property is a win for both the community and the contract purchaser. With that, let me turn things over now to our village manager, Randy Recklouse. Randy?
Thank you, Mayor. As the mayor said, tonight's a very early step on what will likely be a very long journey for our community as we begin to discuss the potential purchase and development of Arlington Racetrack property by the Chicago Bears. Again, tonight we're not requesting that the village board make any decisions related to this effort. That's not what this meeting is about. But given the magnitude of the project, the confidentiality of the discussions thus far, and the community's interest in this project, we wanted to recap where we've been and what the village's approach will be in the coming months as the Chicago Bears make a decision on whether or not to proceed with the purchase and development of the site. I'm going to go to the next slide. For the village, this discussion really began last August. The mayor and I were invited to a confidential meeting by Churchill Downs International to meet with who we were told were the quote-unquote finalists for the racetrack property sale process that had been underway since the spring of 2021. We were not told who we were meeting with. When we entered the room, George McCaskey and Ted Phillips were there. They told us that they were in the process of negotiating a purchase and sales agreement with Churchill Downs, and then shortly after that meeting, the agreement was finalized and announced publicly. Since that time, the village has been in regular communication with the Bears representatives about their progress and helping them to understand the village's development standards and processes, as well as the village board's values and helping to introduce them to other important area stakeholders. Since last fall, as you have all seen, the Bears have developed a preliminary concept they are exploring that includes a state-of-the-art NFL football stadium, a large mixed-use development that includes shopping, entertainment, large public parks, a sportsbook betting facility, and other uses. While the village has been made familiar with these early concepts, the village does not yet have sufficient detail and information to review the concepts formally. That will come as more details are fleshed out if the Bears determine that they wish to proceed. It's important to note that despite these significant steps, the Bears have not closed on the property just yet. They have not purchased it. We've been told that they will be making a decision to purchase the property in late 2022 or early 2023. Even if they purchase it, we do not know at this time what their final plans will be. I want to assure everyone that the Bears cannot develop this property without village approval. Therefore, the Bears have indicated that gaining an early understanding of the village's processes, values, and goals for the site is a necessary step for them that must be taken prior to making any purchasing decision. This project, if it goes forward, will be one of the largest and most significant projects ever in the state of Illinois, and obviously is unlike anything the village of Arlington Heights has undertaken to date. Therefore, the village will be reviewing this project in a more thoughtful and detailed manner than we would with a more typical proposal. While the scale of this project will be different than a typical project, the village's values will not be. Our job is to make sure that any project built in Arlington Heights will be a good thing for this community and will have positive economic and fiscal benefits. That has not changed. Tonight, we'll be talking about a number of the unique steps that the village is taking to ensure that a good outcome for our community in the event this project goes forward can occur. One notable step is that we're working with the Bears on currently is to develop a mutually agreed upon and formally approved roadmap that will lay out a process for the village's review of the proposal. The development of that roadmap will be a big focus of our efforts this fall. It is also a necessary step for the Bears prior to their making a purchasing decision. At this point, I'm going to turn things over to our Director of Planning and Community Development, Charles Perkins, who's going to talk about some of the steps that the village has taken thus far.
Thank you, Randy. Good evening, everybody. I'd just like to talk a little bit about the village's involvement to date. And you'll be pleased to know I will not go back to 1969 when the property was annexed into Arlington Heights. But I will go back and talk a little bit about last year after Churchill Downs announced that they were looking to sell the property. We started to delve into the site and really start looking at it seriously on its potential and how it could be redeveloped, whether it was with a racetrack or, as we are now looking at, with a potential NFL stadium. Just to orient everybody, I think everybody's familiar with the property. It's 326 acres. It's located northwest portion of Arlington Heights. On the western boundary, on the left of the slide that you can see, is Route 53 and Rolling Road. On the south, on the bottom of the screen, is Euclid Avenue. On the east, on the right-hand side of the screen, is Wilkie Road. And then running diagonally northwest to southeast on the top right is Northwest Highway and the railroad tracks. So in June last year, after the appropriate public hearings, the village board approved an overlay zoning district for Arlington International Racecourse property. And I'll talk a little bit what an overlay zoning district is and why that's important. But part of that was to create a vision that this property be redeveloped as a one-of-a-kind redevelopment opportunity for the highest and best use of the property by developing something truly exciting for generations to come. It has been an iconic landmark for almost 100 years with the racetrack, and we were envisioning that some new development could be of comparable value to the community and the region. The property is designated mixed use on the village's comprehensive plan. Now, the village's comprehensive plan just sets a guide for potential land uses and is a tool that we use in working with developers and looking at what type of development is appropriate. Other examples of a mixed-use designation are our downtown Arlington Heights. That's also designated mixed use. looking at the zoning of the property, the zoning is currently zone B3, which is a general service motor vehicle wholesale district. That's these B3 districts are located throughout our town, and they work well for auto repair and service stations and various uses, but was not appropriate for this particular property. Rather than trying to rezone the whole property, we created the overlay district. So the overlay district for this property just sets forth different standards and higher criteria to put developers on notice before the Bears got the property under contract of what the village's intention was. So it really establishes some additional guidelines for the 326 acres. As I mentioned, it supplements the underlying zoning, but also supersedes it where it's different or more restrictive. The intent of the regulations is to promote a mixed-use redevelopment of the property in a master plan coordinated manner. So without the overlay district, a developer could have perhaps purchased the property and divided it into multiple pieces and then come in and tried to redevelop it, and that was not the vision that the village wanted, nor the village that the village board wanted to see. So other conditions of use also would have allowed the continuation of a racetrack. That was not precluded in the overlay zoning district either. These list of 20 plus uses are allowed in the B3 district, but they are prohibited on this site in the overlay zoning district. We did not want to see uses such as, car washes, auto service stations, vehicle repair, tool and die shops, warehouse distribution facilities. This doesn't mean that the village couldn't allow some of these uses in the future as part of an approved master plan development if it was appropriate, but we wanted to initially preclude these uses and look at a higher and best use for the property. We also talked in the overlay district about preservation of natural site features such as Salt Creek Linear Park, and also the opportunity, because it's such a large property, to create a central park amenity. Those are things that we don't have in our zoning ordinance for other properties, but we wanted to let developers know we were looking for something unique and special here, and that we were looking for park amenities and natural site feature retention above and beyond what would be normal or typical. The overlay district also designates or encourages transit-oriented development, which is development close proximity to transit, like the metro station, within 1,300 feet. Now, 1,300 feet is approximately a quarter of a mile, and is the same distance as from our downtown train station to Sigwalt Street as a comparable, and that's about a 5 and a 6 minute walk. The overlay district also encourages reuse or preservation of some landmark features and site elements if feasible. It prohibited the subdivision of the property without being part of a master plan development. It also reinforced the requirement for impact fees, land dedication and extension and provision of utilities that would be necessary to provide service to the property and the future development. And then lastly, the overlay district also encourages sustainable features, both in land and in building and in uses. So I'll turn it back to Randy.
Sure. Thanks, Charles. I covered some of these things already in the opening remarks, but we developed this overlay district in anticipation of who the contract purchaser could be. We really didn't know who it might be, and we wanted, to protect the village from those scenarios that we didn't think of as desirable. After we developed that overlay district, that was when that meeting with the Bears occurred. And since then, in addition to meeting with team representatives, we've been meeting with members of their consulting teams so they can also better understand some of the unique features of the site and the surrounding area, as well as connecting them with stakeholders. Part of getting any good development done is knowing when you need outside assistance. And so with that, Charles is going to talk a little bit about some of the outside help that we've hired and what role they will be playing.
Thank you. Just to recap for the board members and those in the public that were not at last Tuesday's meeting, September 6th, the village board did concur with staff's recommendation to retain 2 consultant firms, one for financial, economic, and market analysis, and the second for traffic and parking These consultants would augment the village staff with their specialty and their expertise in stadium and mixed-use entertainment district developments. We issued a request for proposals in June of this year, and for the financial economic market analysis, that was just sent to just 8 firms that specialize in these kind of developments. They have a specialty in stadium developments. They've done this many times. We received 4 proposals, interviewed 2 firms, and felt very good with recommending Hunden Strategic Partners. They also have some sub-consultants that are working with them. They specialize in providing advisory services and for destination real estate development, economic development, and tourism. They've developed and worked on over 1,000 projects with a value of approximately $20 billion. Over the last 9 months, Hunden has been working on an NBA district in Milwaukee, and NFL and NHL deals in Virginia and Arizona. So they will be part of our team, working with the village, reviewing plans and studies when they're submitted by the Chicago Bears Football Club. And we broke the scope of work into 4 or 5 elements. I'll just discuss 3 of them. So peer review, so that's just what it means. We are anticipating a detailed financial economic analysis to be submitted at some point in the future from the Bears organization. Hunden will be reviewing that, looking at that high-level economic impact assessment. They'll provide their findings on areas of concern or deficiencies or assets and benefits. They'll also provide a high-level opinion of financial feasibility and economic benefit of the project and its impact upon the village. The second step would be independent market analysis, where they'll look at comparable stadiums, information that that they've recovered and received and evaluated from other similar projects. They look at mixed-use profiles, and in particular, we've asked them to look at potential impact on ongoing operations and projections for Arlington Heights and what a potential cost recovery. So what are our ongoing operational costs for police, fire, and other services, and what cost recovery structures could there be for that? And then lastly, on step 3, to review and ensure that the development has a net positive fiscal impact on the community. And what does that mean? That means the project generating revenues, the revenues generated by that project exceed any public costs or operational costs that the village may have. So this site has the potential to generate a significant amount of tax revenue in a variety of forms, and we just need to make sure that exceeds any other ongoing costs and any other costs that might be agreed upon by the village. The second traffic consultant that was recommended and retained is Sam Schwartz. They're a 140-person firm with 8 offices around the United States, including one in Chicago. They have provided past transportation engineering studies for arenas and special events, including MetLife Stadium, Wrigley Field, the Barclays Center, and Oakland A's ballpark. They've also done some local peer review, the City of Waukegan's casino proposal, and the Obama Presidential Library Center. So they'll do a similar approach in looking at the peer review traffic study that we're anticipating receiving from the Chicago Bears. They'll provide a report on areas of deficiencies or improvements. In particular, we would be looking for them to provide a high-level opinion during that peer review of any on- and off-site improvements that would be needed to accommodate traffic and ingress and egress into the property, as well as multimodal transportation, Metro, Pace, rideshare, other modes beyond a regular automobile. The step 2 would be that they will then conduct independent research to validate capacity ratios, shared parking assumptions, and things of that nature. And then thirdly, they would provide ongoing consultancy to the village as we review various phases of the project, assuming the Bears move forward with that. Funding for these 2 consultants is being provided by the Chicago Bears Football Club. They have provided funds in escrow, and those escrow funds will be used, but these consultants are retained and representing the village of Arlington Heights in our best interests. So,
obviously, we know from from many of us living in this community and also from the feedback we've received that traffic and financing are two of the biggest concerns that the community has. And obviously those are concerns that we share, and that's why we want to make sure we're getting the best possible advice we can on those items from people who have done this many times before. But aside from getting outside help, village staff has been trying to learn as much as we can about stadium deals, financing, and operations over the past few months. As has been stated in previous meetings, there are certainly examples of stadium projects that have fared badly for host communities. However, there are others that have been great successes for host communities, and we obviously want to do all we can to be in that latter camp. To that end, staff has begun reaching out to, meeting, and corresponding with our own counterparts from other cities that have built NFL stadiums and sports and entertainment districts in other parts of the country. So far, we've met our counterparts in Inglewood, California, Foxborough, Massachusetts, and Las Vegas, Nevada. We are also in the process of researching other comparable facilities and entertainment districts elsewhere in the country that we can meet with and learn from. We're trying to understand from their perspective what they felt went well, what they would have done differently. And we've found that our peers have been very candid and supportive of these efforts to seek, what's going on, and we've been learning quite a bit. We're going to continue this research, and again, we're trying to learn from both the successes and the mistakes made by other communities. Staff has also been corresponding and working with academics who study and analyze NFL stadium deals for a living to learn about broader trends in stadium developments, economics, and operations, so again, we can avoid the pitfalls that some communities have experienced and mirror the successful ones. We've brought a couple of these experts into Arlington Heights for training over the past couple of months so that our leadership team understands these trends and learns from them as a group. Additional training is going to be occurring this fall as well. So I want to make the point that we are not taking this lightly. We fully appreciate the complexity of what we're about to embark upon here, but we're trying to learn as much as we can from those who have done it themselves and those who have extensively studied it. At this point, I think it's appropriate for Charles to give a brief overview of the preliminary concept itself. We know there was a meeting last Thursday, but we don't know how many folks out there listening at home or in the room saw those plans, and so we're going to give a brief overview of that as well before we go on.
Thank you. Before I talk about the plans that the Chicago Bears did present last Thursday, just want to show this graphic. This is an approximation of the racetrack property superimposed over our downtown. On the northwest corner, the far left is Ridge Avenue and Northwest Highway and the Public Works Center. The bottom left is South Middle School. Bottom right is part of Scarsdale Estates, Scarsdale subdivision, not the estates. And to the right covers a little portion of Mariano's and Recreation Park along Northwest Highway and back to Ridge. This is 326 acres. It's a huge site. Just to put it in comparison how big it is, it's over a mile in width from west to east. It's a significant property. It's going to take many years to develop. It's going to take many months and years to go through the entitlement process with all the studies that are necessary. So I just thought this graphic kind of puts it in perspective a little bit, so everybody can imagine the size of property that we're dealing with. Also, very quickly, before the Chicago Bears did get the property under contract, we had looked at some of the assets of the property, and these were some of the thoughts that we had as a staff of how the property could develop, not knowing that it was going to be put under contract by Chicago Bears. So we talked about unique mixed-use development, sports, entertainment, commercial, office, residential, whether the existing grandstand could be used on an interim base of some sort, whether there's the opportunity for a smaller stadium venue like a major league ice hockey, for example. And then the desire to import revenues from outside of the community by creating something unique and new. There's an opportunity for a big play stadium, which is what we're obviously talking about. Other elements I've talked about, but the two other key assets that the site has is the Salt Creek Park, which is a great asset for open space and for pedestrian and bicycle connection through and into the property, and also the train station. There's not many sites this size that have the access to a metro train station and the things that that can provide. And then last but not least, the ability to enhance and connect to downtown and not detract from our downtown, and that's very important to keep in mind as we go through this process and look at the studies and their plans. So I have 3 slides that the team presented last Thursday. These are very conceptual in nature. They've not been formally submitted to the village or reviewed by village staff or the 2 consulting firms that were just retained last week. But I think it's important to just, for those that were not at the meeting that the Chicago Bears had last week, to just, very quickly go over this concept. I'm not trying to represent the team in their presentation by any means, nor are we at the stage where we're ready to answer questions on this, but they are talking about a regional destination, a stadium district on the west side of the property, west of Salt Creek Park, adjacent to Route 53. It would be buffered by Route 53 and Northwest Highway, so that's an advantage. Immediately west of there are the industrial parks in Rolling Meadows and Palatine, so the stadium venue would not be adjacent to any residential, so that's a good asset and good site planning. To the east of Salt Creek, so on the right-hand side of your slide, there are 2 zones. One is the transit-oriented development, the higher density mixed-use zone entertainment district. The team has talked about a walkability within 5 minutes of walking for that kind of district, and that really matches up with the 1,300 feet that we have in our overlay district. So they've taken to heart that overlay district, and they've also incorporated their thoughts from their expertise in designing these kind of sites over the course of the years and throughout the country. On the south part of the property towards Euclid is a lower density residential that they're proposing within a 10-minute walk of the metro station. And then there's significant amount of open space and expansion and enhancement of Salt Creek. And then running kind of parallel with Northwest Highway through the middle of the property is an open park concept that would be available for those coming to the site, not just at a game day or an event day, but throughout the year for the long-term development of the property. And that kind of matches up with our idea of having this central park component that was an asset to not only the development but also the region. So transportation, we know there's going to be a lot of questions about transportation to the property. As I'd mentioned, it does have direct access to Metro station, so that's a huge asset. There are also 2 full interchanges with Route 53, one at Euclid and one at Northwest Highway. The traffic consultant that the team have retained has been looking at how to get traffic in and out of the property, and they've identified a number of potential improvements. These are still very conceptual and subject to further study, but not only with the village and the village's consultant, but also with other agencies like the State of Illinois and Cook County Highway Department. But generally they are talking about enhancing the northbound exit ramp off Route 53 at Euclid to increase the capacity of that ramp. They're talking about enhancing the southbound ramp off Euclid onto 53 to again increase the capacity. One of the significant elements that they're looking at and exploring is an underpass under Northwest Highway for northbound traffic that exits towards Northwest Highway to go under Northwest Highway, under the railroad tracks and directly into the site. And then there would be a comparable underpass just west of 53 to exit under the railroad tracks, under Northwest Highway, onto the southbound ramp to go south on Route 53. Again, there are a lot of agencies and studies and engineering plans that need to be vetted and looked at to see if that is viable, but that is what they're currently exploring. They're also looking at adding some new intersections, some signalized intersections. One would be mid-block along Wilkie Road between Northwest Highway and Euclid. and then they're looking at 2 signalized intersections along Euclid, one at the current main entrance to the racetrack property, which is not signalized and never has been, and then one further east towards Wilkie Road. They're also exploring the possibility of a signalized intersection on Rolling Road as well, and then there'll be some other improvements to roadways and signalizations, as you pan out further from the property. They've also started to look at parking, both on-site and off-site. Their plan will include maintaining the Metro commuter parking. Metro has a long-term lease for the commuter surface parking lot, and the team are talking with Metro on how to use that, both for game day and also potentially in the long term build that into structured parking that could be used during the day for commuters and in the evening and weekends for events and the entertainment district. So that's very quickly their plan. There's a couple of renderings that they also showed. This is a bird's eye view, kind of from above the stadium looking southeast along that Central Park element with the mixed-use entertainment district surrounding that park, and they're showing the views of downtown Chicago in the distance. And then this last view is more of a bird's eye view from the southwest, showing a placeholder of the stadium on the left, and then the development to the right. And you can see on this one the large amounts of Salt Creek Park and the lakes and for stormwater detention and amenities for the development. So that's a quick overview. I know the team spent a lot longer than I did on Thursday last week going through this with the public, but we did want to just show that for the benefit of everybody.
So what comes next? As I said before, we're in the process of developing we're calling a development roadmap with the Chicago Bears that outlines expectations for both parties. We anticipate that this will come before the Village Board this October for discussion and possible approval later this year. Another step that will occur this fall is an amendment to that overlay district that Charles talked about a little while ago. So in that overlay district now, as Charles said, there are certain uses that are excluded and certain uses that are contemplated. Currently, a stadium or a sports venue is permitted as a special use under that overlay district. So what that means is that while a stadium or sports venue is contemplated, they can't just up and build it by right. It would be subject to a special use permit process, meaning that they would have to demonstrate to us that it works there, and we again would have the ability to say no based on a certain amount of criteria. What the amendment that's being contemplated would do is it would similarly allow a sportsbook facility to be permitted as a special use as well. Again, this does not give them permission to build one, but it just shows that such a use could also be contemplated within this overlay district. This action would demonstrate that the Bears' overall concept, or the two main features of it, would be compatible with the village's zoning on that site, as the mixed-use type district is already something that's contemplated within that district. But again, it would not give them any approvals. The roadmap agreement and the zoning overlay district amendment are the only two issues that will be formally discussed prior to a potential closing on the property by the Bears this fall. I'm going to go to the next slide. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of other work that will continue behind the scenes over the coming months after a decision to close on the property is made by the Bears if they decide to go forward. While the Bears have done some preliminary work with their own financial, economic, and traffic and parking studies, the village has not yet had the opportunity to review them. We will begin the process of reviewing those studies with the help of our newly hired consultants to ensure that we agree with the assumptions and the concepts that they contain. The village would likely supplement the Bears studies with additional studies if we felt they were needed or warranted to make sure we fully understand the impact of any potential project so they could be addressed in the design, or if it's something that's found to be undesirable by the Village Board ultimately. The Bears would then refine their plans and studies based on our input. During this same period, we would look at possible amendments to our comprehensive plan to address those issues identified. We would also look at creating potentially a new zoning district. This would provide far more clarity and guidance than the current overlay district once we had a better idea of a plan that all the parties could agree upon. After that, the Bears would submit detailed plans and studies that would reflect their actual proposal. All of this could be in phases, and we really don't know how this is all going to go. Some NFL projects that we've looked at have had several years between, say, a proposed stadium concept and an entertainment district. Others have happened simultaneously. And so how this goes, and if it goes at all, a lot of that is up to the Bears as the would-be property owner if they go forward with it. It's important to note that virtually every step of the way there will be input from the public. At both public meetings and public hearings, depending on how formal the item is. But any meeting of the village board is a public meeting, and the public will be invited and will have the opportunity to provide input. We also will be putting information on the village's website as we go. There's already information on there now where you can see what we've done to date. This PowerPoint presentation will be on the website tomorrow. Now, one aspect of this project that I know many people have questions on is, how is this project going to be paid for? Now, it's premature to discuss any details of the economic and financial aspects of this project, as they truly haven't been developed. However, I can say this. The Bears stated publicly that they are not planning on requesting any village funds to pay for a stadium. I'll say that again. The Bears have stated publicly that they are not planning on requesting any village funds to pay for a stadium. We understand that they may ask the village for assistance or contributions to public improvements elsewhere on the site. What are public improvements? Public improvements are things such as roads, water mains, and other pieces of infrastructure. The Bears have not asked the village to pay for anything at this time, and the village has not agreed to pay for anything at this time. If we receive such a request, we will treat that request the same way we treat any other development request, big or small, that we receive anywhere in the community from anyone. The questions that we always ask are, one, can the developer prove to our satisfaction that the project would not be feasible without a public-private partnership? Two, can the project itself generate enough new tax revenue to the village to cover all of the new expenses that the village would need to incur related to that project? Three, will the village still realize a net fiscal benefit from the project? That is, after any expenses, will the village still realize positive revenue from that project above and all expenses? Again, getting into the details of this is premature, but given the interest, we wanted to make sure everyone understands the village's general approach to these issues. This approach has been used over and over again with success in our community, most notably with our award-winning downtown. So I wanted to make that point. If you want to go to the next slide. As I said in the beginning of this meeting, this is just the very first of many public meetings. Next month, we're going to be having meetings to discuss the roadmap concept. Around that same time, we'll be beginning public meetings to discuss the zoning text amendment for a sports wagering facility in the overlay district. After this fall, if the process continues, there will be meetings on possible comprehensive plan amendments, zoning text amendments, and zoning master plan proposals for the redevelopment plan. In addition to these, there would be meetings on any public-private partnership discussions if those requests are received and justified. So I know we covered a lot. So at this point, I would like to open up to questions from the village board and the public.
Well, thank you, Randy and Charles, for your presentation. Just so the audience knows, the rest of the evening will be focused on questions or comments from the village board first, and then we'll go to the audience. I do have a number of blue cards here. If you would like to address the board, just so we have a record of it, if you could please see Village Clerk Becky Hume down here and fill out a blue card just so we have a record of who spoke this evening. But we do want to make sure that anyone and everyone who wants to address the board tonight has an opportunity to do so. As we do in all of our village board meetings, we do like to limit your comments to 3 minutes, just so that we can efficiently run our meeting here this evening, but we'll make sure that you get a full and fair opportunity to be heard. And as the village manager indicated, this is just the first opportunity that the residents, our community, has had a chance to address the village board on this issue. So there will be, as I said at the beginning of my comments, many, many opportunities for the public to weigh in as we go through this process. Before I turn it over to my colleagues for comments or questions, let me just publicly thank our team of folks that have been working on this project now for nearly a year and a half. We've got just some tremendous folks that have been involved in this process. I'm so proud of the work that our team has done under the very able leadership of our village manager, Randy Recklaus. This is a complex project. This is something, as I indicated, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, something that none of us have ever been involved in before. And so we want to make sure that we do it right, that we don't screw it up for the benefit of all of our residents, and not just those in Arlington Heights, but for the Northwest suburban region. And so, again, I am so proud of the work that our team has done so far. We're at a very, very early stage. We've been working on it for a year and a half already. We've got years to come before this redevelopment, whatever it may be, becomes a reality. But I'm confident that we've got the team in place, the individuals in place, to make sure that we get this done right and that we do it in a way that it is a win-win for the Chicago Bears, whoever the eventual contract purchaser is, and our community. And so again, thanks to Randy and all members of the team for the great work that they've done so far. With that, let me turn it over to the board for questions or comments before we go to the audience. I think Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Just, Randy, really quick. So, as you stated, I think, very clearly, and I just want to make sure everybody heard it the way I heard it, the process for this fall is two things. We're going to talk about and determine a proper roadmap toward an approval process for next year. That's the first thing.
Correct.
The second thing is we're going to talk about the text amendment for sports wagering as a special use as we have currently set up for the stadium.
That is correct.
So for now, from now till after the signatures dry on the purchase and everything else, it's really just those two items.
Those are the two items that we'll be dealing with formally, yes.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to Randy and to the staff. I know that through speaking with many of them, you guys have been working diligently on making sure that you get up to speed to be able to handle, as the mayor said, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that's come before the village, or that will be coming before the village. I think that, you know, the most important elements of this project are going to be that we continue with the quality of life that we have in Arlington Heights, and that is not degraded by this new development, and that there's a significant increase in the net revenue to the village, because there are going to be, you know, inconveniences. There are going to be elements of a redevelopment that aren't going to be loved by everybody in the community, so there has to be a significant increase to the net income, because I mean the racetrack definitely provided revenue to the village. And this development, from what I've seen by the Chicago Bears have put forward, is a very large and dense development. So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear that we have been speaking to the village manager and the staff and sharing these concerns with them, and we hear them throughout the community, and this will be one of many opportunities that we get to hear from you. And as Trustee Tinaglia mentioned, there's a lot going on this year, but we're only going to be focusing on a couple of those items through the end of the year. Thank you, Mayor.
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. Manager Recklaus, you talked a little bit about the consultants that we just hired last week, but I think it might be of interest to the public how you found these consultants. Why Yes, their proposals were on the website as part of the agenda last week, but why do these particular consultants and the others that you'd met can really represent our interests as we move forward with this? What makes them different than the consultants we often see coming to the board when there are projects in town?
You want to take this one, Charles?
Sure. Two parts to the question. One, how did we find them? And two, what makes them special? So how we found them, the financial consultants, Mr. Recklaus and I went to a conference, a sports and entertainment conference late last year after the Bears had announced that they had the property under contract. That conference just specializes in this kind of development. It's a very niche conference, and we met a number of firms at that conference. Some of them were presenting, some we met in the networking sessions, and we then did our due diligence. We checked them out, looked at their background, and then we sent a RFP to 8 of those firms that we felt had a good experience and that they had really delved into the financial market and economic impacts of stadium entertainment developments. And they're different than some of our other consultants that might, for example, do a impact study to determine whether an area would qualify for tax increment financing on a smaller corridor that has more typical land uses. So we did feel we needed a specialty firm that just specialized in this kind of development. And the same for the traffic and parking. There are more firms that do traffic and parking than the financial side. So we did send out to about 21 of those firms. Again, they're bigger firms. They do big projects. They're used to, dealing with, significant, traffic peak demands from surges, the hour before in particular and the hour after of a larger event. And so that's how we looked into those consultants. We felt those were important to get on board early to augment, our internal staff. And those are areas that we're not specialized in.
If I could add to it, one of the things that we're realizing is that it is these types of facilities and these types of districts are very unique. Their relationship with traffic, the economics of them are different than any other type of development. And so we wanted, the other thing that's relatively unique, it happens on occasion outside of this world, but not as often, is this peer review process where, the host city will hire a consultant to review the work presented by the team that's coming forward. And we wanted to get firms that were familiar with that process, who had engaged in it, who understood how professional sports teams thought, how they generated money, how they sought profit, so that we would be able to hit the ground running and understand how they think.
Thank you. And one more comment. I was glad that you also brought out, not only are people concerned about the taxes or the financial impact it might have on residents, as well as the traffic impact, but also the impact on the downtown, on our downtown, because that's definitely a comment I hear a lot about, that people want to preserve the specialness of it and not to suddenly have it become not as well used, if you will, because it is a jewel, and like you said, we have an award-winning downtown, and it is a reason we know from surveys that people move here. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad.
And to that point, I mean, when we've been talking to our peers in other communities that host NFL facilities, we've talked about that as well, and we've been seeking out some of the communities that aren't necessarily a big city that are hosting NFL teams, because it would be more comparable to what we are. And so we've been learning from that process and how they've dealt with those issues and the strategies that they've done to ensure that their existing businesses aren't negatively impacted.
Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Bertucci.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd also like to start with a thank you to Randy, Charles, and the rest of the staff. I'm seeing a methodical, kind of a no-nonsense, we're going to work on this, we're going to figure it out. And when we realize that we may not have the expertise in-house, we will seek consultants, we will get professional opinions. I think that's all very important. I also appreciate, not only as a trustee, but as a downtown Arlington Heights resident, that we are being, have a sense of awareness of how this will affect our downtown Arlington Heights. The other thing I just want to mention is I'm also very happy to see, not only with staff, but also with my colleagues and fellow trustees and the mayor, is a sense of no matter how long this takes or how long we will be here. I mean, obviously we have elections coming up, we have possible retirements over the next 5-10 years, and this is a long-term plan, but I'm really happy to say that, at least my observation is that we all want to leave it better than we found it. As a football analogy, we'll carry the ball as long as it's our turn, our time and our turn. We'll carry the ball as best as possible. And then when it's time to pass the ball to somebody else, we will do it in the most effective manner. So I want to thank, and I'm, like I say, very proud of, and when what I see from my fellow trustees, the mayor and staff, is that we will do our best to work on this project and leave it better than we found it, and then eventually know that there's a chance that we may have to pass the ball to somebody else. So, thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else on the board before we go to the audience? Seeing none. All right, I do have some blue cards, and so let me just go through them, and if anyone else wants to address the board, if you could just fill out a blue card, we'd appreciate it. Again, you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit, and Becky, where's the clock for the audience?
You won't see the clock, but you will see lights at the top of the stage where the microphone is, and when it goes to yellow, that means time's almost up, and when it goes to red, the 3 minutes is over.
Okay, thanks a lot. First is Susan Scrudland, and then next is Teresa Jordan.
All right, thank you, and I want to thank you for the presentation and all the information. I think one thing that was really encouraging to me in hearing the questions from the board and the presentation was consideration for our downtown Arlington Heights. It is a jewel. It is a big part of what makes Arlington Heights such a great and attractive community, and something I don't think anybody wants to see hurt by whatever is developed. So it's a question, and I think also an ask is, has there been anything discussed as far as studies or getting information on how this sort of development, like a Bears development or an entertainment district, could impact our downtown? I think it's great to have the stated goal that we want it to be connected to it and enhance it as opposed to distract from it or detract from it. But in reality, the community works hard to make sure we're supporting our small downtown businesses and keeping them healthy. And it's gonna, certainly I would expect it to be a strain for those mom and pop businesses to be competing with a large, bright, shiny entertainment district that's just down the road. So I'd like to ask what you're considering doing, what plans you might have for studies, et cetera, to ensure that we are continuing to be able to support the great downtown we have.
Okay. Susan, thank you for the question. Let me just take a first crack at that, and I'll turn it over to the staff. The Bears are fully committed to making sure that whatever they do complements not only our downtown, but other entertainment and shopping districts within the community. They've been very clear in our discussions with them that they don't want to do anything to harm our existing businesses, and they're going to do all they can to make sure that what they do complements our existing businesses, especially our downtown. I've always considered from the time I first saw this plan that there would be a synergistic effect between our downtown and any redevelopment at Arlington Park, especially under what's proposed here by the Chicago Bears, where they would kind of feed off each other. And I do think there'll be a big enough difference in the mom and pop, the sole proprietor stores in our downtown, as opposed to what might be in this entertainment and shopping district at Arlington Park. So I think there'll be a very loyal customer base that will stay with the people in downtown, stay with the shops in downtown. You may see some new people coming to the shops and restaurants in the entertainment district in the new development, but I do think there will be a complementary effect, a synergistic effect between the two.
I think it's a great question, and as you heard, I think we're all looking at that, working on that, and it is something we talk to extensively with our consultants. And I don't think we have answers completely to that question, but it is something that our consulting teams are going to be looking at. But I think one of the things that, to go along with what the mayor said, is that there has to be a differentiation between what type of district might be contemplated here in our downtown. And I think that if you differentiate between the types of businesses, the type of atmosphere that you're going to have in those two, then the two may not compete with one another. And and again, I don't want to go too much further because we're all kind of guessing at this point what this could be. The other thing is this project, if it occurs, will take place over a long period of time, and our downtown is a very well-established, very successful downtown. It will have time to adjust and evolve somewhat to make sure that that differentiation occurs. But it is something that we'll continue to talk about, and one of the things that we acknowledge is we don't have all the answers, and that's why we're bringing people on board that have experience with this.
Any other comments on that? Trustee Canty?
I just want to reiterate what what Village Manager Recklaus commented on, and that's the retention of our experts and consultants, right? So we won't just be relying on the Bears telling us that they're not going to compete with our downtown. We will be seeking guidance, and we will be getting input from the community so that we have our own informed opinions on that. And I think that's really critical to this whole process. We are retaining experts so that we don't have to rely solely on a picture painted by an interested party. We have our own experts to help us with these decisions.
I think you made a really good point, Trustee Canty, that we are also going to be getting input from the community and from the businesses and from our downtown business leaders to get their thoughts on this. And, it's very much a collaborative process.
All right, if nothing further, next is Teresa Jordan, and then Tom Locke.
Thank you very much. My name is Teresa Jordan. I'm also a member of the Environmental Commission for the Village of Arlington Heights. So appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, listen to the presentation, ask my questions. So I was very pleased to see that one of the values that that's been put forward is that this should be a sustainable development. However, the term can be a little vague. It's sort of like saying you want your kids to have good grades in school. Some parents are satisfied with a C average, and others insist on straight A's. So as a village, I think that we share the vision that we want to be in the straight A camp. So, but what exactly does that mean for our village? And so sustainability is a very complicated subject. This is a very complicated development. I would not expect that we have this sort of expertise on staff. We've talked a lot about, or we've heard a lot about the consultants that we're going to be retaining, and I'd like to hear more about how the village would approach including sustainable features in this development. There are many examples of stadiums in the United States and across the globe that are doing this. There's the Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle that the Kraken now play in. I love that name, by the way, for a hockey team. There's the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. They have, I think, over 4,000 solar panels installed there, and they pretty much power their entire complex with solar power. So these are just some of the ideas that are actively working for other stadiums in our country and other communities like us, and I'd like to hear more about our village's approach to that.
Well, thanks, Teresa. Let me take a first crack at that as well. One of the things that jumped out at me, and hopefully jumped out at you when you see the preliminary plan that has been presented, is the green space and the water features that are included in the preliminary plan. And in conjunction with that, there'll be many walkable sidewalks and lanes for people to walk who are not just coming to the game, but want to come and get some exercise, just enjoy the new space. And so I was very impressed by that, and I told the team that I know that's something that is going to be very much appreciated by people like you, Teresa, those on the Environmental Commission, and others that are concerned about environmental issues and sustainability. And so that's just one thing that really jumped out at me. Staff?
Yeah, I can just add a couple of things on that question. It is important, and that's why it's in as a specific item in the overlay zoning district, and it gets into a little more detail than what I just showed on the slide. It's, you'll probably hear this a lot, and I don't mean this in a bad way. It's a little premature at this point because we don't have a lot of details on their plans. So it really starts with, looking at the site and making sure the site is designed in a sustainable way. Obviously, with the metro station, that's a huge, important element. And, having development around that station that has a lower parking, demand and ratio to cut down on those carbon emissions and make it more of a walkable community. So the site planning is the first step. And then as we get more plans and details, then we'll start to look at the buildings themselves. How are the buildings being designed? What sustainable features are they including in those buildings? How is the site being phased? How are they, handling the construction on the site? Are they using sustainable practices, with demolition and things of that nature? So we're a long way away from being able to answer a lot of those questions, but it is one of the things that's already been, made aware to the team and their consultants, and it is one of the things we'll continue to look at.
Anything else from the board? All right, thank you for the question, Teresa. Next is Tom Locke, and then Renee Poor.
My name is Tom Locke. I've lived in Arlington Heights for over 60 years. Grew up here, and I last spoke to you about this a couple of years ago, or when it first came up, that the Bears might be purchasing land. I was concerned that there'd be a big frenzy about it, and not a lot of thought would go into it, but I'm very impressed by the stuff you guys have presented tonight. And it was also impressed because I attended the meeting at Hershey last week with the Bears, and it was also very impressive as well. But one of the things that was asked at the Bears presentation that we kind of got this nebulous non-answer from them, and I didn't hear anything about it from you guys tonight. So you've been talking about the impact it might have on local businesses, which is a very legitimate thing to talk about. But at the same time, I haven't heard anything, and the Bears didn't answer this either, as to what specific efforts will be made to prevent the negative impact to the residential neighborhoods that are near Arlington Park. We're talking about, say, Linwood or Virginia Terrace, or say, for example, Arlington Park, Ridge Park. I live there, and two of my sons do. And then you get down to like Arlingdale and Westgate. We haven't heard anything about the negative impact to, say, for example, the extra traffic, the noise, safety, what the effect will be on property values. This may be good for Arlington Heights as a whole, but specifically on the people bordering the property. I haven't heard anything about what will be done to not negatively impact the property values. I'll be happy if it breaks even. I'll be thrilled if it goes up. When I sell anyway, not when I pay my taxes. But I don't want to have a negative impact to that. It's an investment. It's my lifelong investment, and I don't want it to get messed up. And so I'm looking to make sure that the quality of life is such that it doesn't get altered. And another thing that hasn't been mentioned, they're talking about residential development and what is the impact going to be on the schools. Now, I know that where that property is District 15, which is Palatine Rolling Meadows, and most of the grade school kids would go to Winston. The junior high kids would go to Sandburg. The high school kids would probably go to Rolling Meadows. So we haven't really heard about, will there be efforts made to coordinate with the developer so that the impact that they have in terms of the number of residents that come there, where they bring young kids, I don't think they're all going to be single people without kids, what will be the impact on the schools? Haven't heard anything about that yet either. And this, I think, I'm personally in favor of it. I really love the idea trying to keep all the traffic by 53 by having the underpass on Northwest Highway. I think increasing traffic that goes eastbound off of 53 onto Euclid, making those double lanes and encouraging people to stay in the, on that side where the traffic is already. And anything that you can do to parlay, say for example, I know there's flood control issues and drainage like in Westgate. You've got a connection to Salt Creek, and I know it's two different water systems. I mean, Waller Creek is basically got no flood control on it whatsoever compared to Salt Creek, which has Bussy Woods and all the other things that are available to them. There may be some way you can work together, take this opportunity to help mitigate problems in Arlington Heights by making connections in that area. And so, quality of life for residents and schools. I haven't heard anything. I'd really like to hear something about that.
Tom, let me just start on this one as well. As you, hopefully you know, quality of life is number one on my priority list. And I've said that since I've been on the village board for some 31, 32 years now, is I believe the quality of life in Arlington Heights is second to none. And it's my goal to make sure that that does not change with this redevelopment, whether it's the Bears or another development. But you raise many, many good questions, and unfortunately we're still in the preliminary stage. What we don't know is you know, exactly where the traffic is going to go and come from, ingress and egress. So a lot of those questions will have to wait until we figure that out, until a plan has been presented to us, and we can then act on that. And same with the school question. We don't know exactly how many residences will be in this development ultimately, so we don't know potentially how many school kids might come into these school districts. I can tell you, though, that we have been talking to all the stakeholders that are involved in these issues, the school districts, the adjacent municipalities, Palatine, Rolling Meadows in particular, because they are going to be, the residences, especially in Rolling Meadows, are going to be impacted as much as the residents in Arlington Heights that are adjacent to it. So we have open dialogue already with all of these stakeholders. I know the chief has already thought about trying to prevent traffic from going into Linwood and Virginia Terrace and Sherwood and all of those neighborhoods to the north and east of the development. And so we're thinking about all those issues, and at the appropriate time we're going to come up with a plan once we have a specific plan from the Bears. But with that, let me turn it over to Mr. Ecklaus for
I think
further
Trustee
questions. Or
Scaletta
Trustee
had a comment.
Scaletta, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Locke, I can assure you that that was one of the things that I brought up, was about the quality of life and that it's going to be impacted. And I can tell you that this board takes every development seriously when it comes to the quality of life. I'll give you an example. Downtown Arlington Heights, there's a big vacant piece of property there. And through the entire process of going through the approvals, we talked about traffic, we talked about parking, we talked about the quality of life, we talked about noise, we talked about the impact that that development would have in this neighborhood. And that is a microcosm of the significant size of the redevelopment of Arlington Park. So believe me, we live in this community and we take that very, very seriously. And I can assure you that we will be talking about every single thing that you've brought up, because we wanted to, we need to understand. Every time I look at these plans, I can't figure out how they're getting in and out. And I keep looking at it going, where's everybody going to park? You know, and then I think about, all right, well, you know, we're going to have a significant amount of police on the property on a regular basis. So there are so many things that run through my head that keep me up at night. But we need an actual plan that we can look at, and not just a bunch of squares on a piece of property. But I can assure you that is going to be taken seriously by this board.
Mr. Ecklaus.
You know, I think, again, I think they're great questions. And again, you know, the short version is we're working on, but I can give you some just ways that we're talking about this. As the mayor mentioned, we've met with the Bears and District 15 and District 211 and District 214 to talk about this issue. They're aware of it. They're asking those questions. Any development that comes in that is going to be potentially generating school-age children, they have to pay impact fees to the appropriate school districts. That's something that we do normally. Now, Whether or not and how many school children are generated, I mean, that's still something that's very much up in the air. These are very, very preliminary conceptual plans. Again, you know, the Bears may not even purchase the property, so we have to just keep saying that. But these are very early plans, and that is a consideration, the impact on surrounding taxing bodies. And so that's very much something that's in play to be discussed. In terms of traffic, the reason we're hiring our own traffic consultant and we're requiring the Bears to, you know, spend a lot of time and energy on coming up with the traffic plans, we know that this is going to be an issue. And the types of, the caliber and type of transportation consultant and parking consultants we're both hiring, they can do very sophisticated modeling based on real world examples of, you know, other NFL stadiums, other entertainment districts on how and when how many cars are coming in and out, you know, what that's going to mean, you know, how many are going to take the highway, how many will take the train, how many will bleed into the, you know, try to bleed into the neighborhoods. That's all stuff that can be monitored and measured and projected. Now, you know, what I can say is, you know, I don't think anyone here can tell you that if this thing is designed perfectly, you're not going to notice that there's a football game going on a Sunday. You know, there will be traffic, but if, you know, for the last 100 years, we've had a significant sports venue at this location that often generated a fair amount of traffic. Back in its heyday, when the racetrack was hosting things like the Breeders' Cup, you know, there were days where we had, you know, 35,000 people attending an event. And so our police department is familiar with how to get people in and out of this site. Now, this is obviously on a different level, but some of the basic characteristics of traffic coming in and out will be similar. Now, this site will be designed hopefully better than the track was for getting people in and out, but it is something we're looking at. The other thing is, when we talk to our peer communities that are hosting these types of stadiums already, that's one of the first questions we ask. What's it like on game day? How long does it take to get out? How do you manage it? And they do aside from design, there are a number of things that can be done in terms of actively managing certain intersections with police officers to get traffic through. And there's new technology now out there too, where you have traffic counters and cameras that can make changes in the traffic controls based on the number of cars. And so we're looking at all of that, and we're being advised on all of that with these folks that we're hiring and that the Bears are hiring. But I mean, but 100%, I think those two issues are two of the biggest challenges and things we're probably going to be spending the most time looking at and talking about.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Bertucci.
The other thing that I just wanted to mention is, and first of all, to say that we've got two consulting groups come, you know, to be report out on, and this one is obviously the ones the Bears are hiring, the one that the Village is hiring. But if you've been to any of sporting events, whether it be in this area or around the country or entertainment venues, it's not uncommon to see controlled intersections and police officers basically saying, you're not going that way. You're going to the expressway. I don't care where else you got to go after that. You're going to the expressway. And so I could envision, you know, a lot of Wilkie Road entrances going east being blocked off, and the police saying, you're not going that way. You're going, you know, the other way. So, I mean, I don't know for sure what the consultants will say, but I just know that when I've left many stadiums and events, you know, we've all probably seen it. Many people, or almost everybody has seen it if they've gone to events like that. So, so I'm pretty confident that we will control that.
Trustee Canty.
And I just want to reiterate again, it's why we've retained consultants, because we're talking about more than just football games or special events. What is being proposed conceptually, and it's hard to talk about because it is just a vision, a potential vision for the future, but it is going to be an influx of people at restaurants, at retail, in homes. And so that's why we've retained these experts to work with our expert teams in our police department, our fire department, and elsewhere, along with our other village staff, to make sure that we're paying close attention and we're getting the right development here. It's not just about how we control the intersections on a game day or on a concert day or on a big trade show day, and we will be paying close attention to all of it, as Trustee Scaletta mentioned.
Okay, next is Renee Poor, who also had a question regarding traffic on Wilkie Road. And so, Renee, hopefully some of that answered your question, but go ahead.
Yes, it did. It definitely piggybacks off of what Tom just talked about. And it's going down Wilkie Road. That's single lane. And so once you get to frontage road, then you get the stop sign over by Kennecott. That traffic, even like with the train, can back up a lot. And it's difficult to get out of the neighborhood. I'm in the Hasbrook neighborhood. So, but I do think you guys kind of just mentioned what you're going to do about that, and it's a wait and see. But even if like Mary Beth talked about, even if there's not a football game, there's going to be residents, there's going to be people getting, going to the entertainment section and the parks and everything. So that seems to be a bit of a area where people cut through there using that Wilkie Road. And so what the consideration is going to be to avoid that kind of traffic. And the other question I have is, how are you going to prevent people who don't want to pay for stadium parking to prevent them from using the neighborhood as a parking lot for themselves?
Okay, good question. Chief, do you have anything to add on this? I know you've mentioned some things to me personally, and so.
Sure. Well, as someone that went to a Sox game about a week or two ago, there's signs all over the place that neighborhood parking for permit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We had a friend that lived in the neighborhood, and they have parking permits issued by the city that says you can park in this neighborhood with this particular piece of paper on your windshield. I'm envisioning something like that. It's probably going to take an ordinance that restricts parking in a neighborhood so people don't want to pay the $90 at the parking venue, and they'll run the risk of paying a $25 parking ticket. So we'll have to weigh the odds and the fines, and we'll probably have to come up with an ordinance that will restrict or prohibit people, discourage people from parking in the neighborhoods.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Sure.
Anybody else on this issue?
The only thing I'd add is we don't have a traffic or parking study from the team yet. We've had some virtual meetings to have conversations with them. A lot of these questions are great questions, and these are the questions that we've asked their consultant to study and look at. We know they've been collecting base traffic data, even at intersections as far away as Arlington Heights Road and I-90, and they are putting their studies and plans together, and they're all good questions. And yeah, once we get that study, we'll delve into it as staff, and then we'll have our own expert consultant evaluating that as well.
Thanks, Charles. All right, next is Brenda Popovic, and then John Ropozinski.
Hello. I'm nervous.
Oh, don't be nervous. You're among friends.
I want to start by saying thank you for everything that you're doing, because I just think the whole development, as we've already heard, can be nerve-wracking for us community members. And so to hear that you are talking to your counterparts in other places and taking all those steps makes me feel a whole lot better. I heard you say that, of course, like, we want to do something with the racetrack that is iconic and exciting, because that's what we had. And we see the plans, and they look exciting. My concern has to do with economics, and that I hope that the racetrack will be able to serve people of all income levels. And when I think about people of all income levels, my other concern is property taxes and how that will impact people in our community. I know when I pick up the Daily Herald, I read a lot about, I think we already kind of struggle with affordable housing in Arlington Heights. I teach in District 214. I teach at Rolling Meadows High School. I've been there for over 20 years, and I know that we have a lot of families that really financially struggle. And so, when I sat at Hersey and I listened to the presentation, the guy in front of me was like, oh, it's like you just won the lottery. Your housing value just went up like amazing amounts. My first thought was, yeah, but so will my property taxes. And I think about what that will do for rent for people. Whether it's you know, for apartments or for businesses that pay rent. And I just would be concerned about losing members of our community. And so I'm just wondering what your thoughts on are keeping things affordable for people.
Well, that is certainly our intention. And so we've been very fortunate to have some very smart people on village staff guide us over the past 3-4 years to a 0% property tax levy. And so it's our intention to continue to be fiscally prudent, whether we've got the Bears at this location or some other development. And as I've said, as the village manager indicated, as I think all this board supports, we're not going to do anything that's going to put our taxpayers, our residents, at a financial, in a financial burden. And so we're not envisioning that. This has to be a win-win. And specifically related to that, our property tax levels. We're not going to do anything that's going to significantly harm our property tax payers, of which we are among those. And so you know, it's hard to predict the future, but we're committed to making sure that this is a win-win for everybody involved. Trustee Scaletta.
So, you know, going back even further than the past 3 or 4 years, this board has made decisions in the past 10, 15 years that make an impact today on your property taxes. And I've always said that living in Arlington Heights, there are a lot of affordable houses. It's the property taxes that aren't affordable. And that's why we had to have an affordable housing ordinance. My opening remarks were that there has to be a significant net revenue, because that significant net revenue is going to help us to offset the additional costs that we have. And so I don't want, this should not increase our property taxes because they come to town. This has to be like a win-win-win for the village. Yes, there's a win on their side, but this has to be a significant win for us, because there are going to be a lot of inconveniences for the residents, whether it be noise, whether it be traffic. So I'm committed to making sure that at the end of the day, this does not negatively impact property taxes. Can't control what the assessor does, but this board is committed.
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. Perhaps Manager Recklaus, you could also mention our affordable housing ordinance that we worked very hard to pass, that I would hope that that's already been shared with the Bears and that sort of thing.
We have touched on it, and you know, what Trustee LaBedz is talking about is last year, the village board passed an affordable housing ordinance that helps to preserve and maintain and increase the amount of attainable housing for people who work in our community, people who, you know, have lived in this community their entire lives and find themselves being priced out. Out of the couple of hundred towns in Chicagoland, there are only 7 that have an affordable housing ordinance, and we're one of them. And so this is something that is very important to this board, and it's something that's kind of hardwired into our planning process when we look at these things. I think that, you know, again, I think as you heard, the board shares your concerns. They've directed that to staff, that these are concerns and things that need to be addressed. And we've shared that with the Bears organization, and we've told them that, you know, when we talk about what are the things that would make the village, you know, less enthusiastic about this project or shy away from it, it is exactly some of these things. And so we've shared that with them, and so they know that this is something that's a value of this board and a value of this community. And that's why, as Trustee Scaletta said, we're really looking at, you know, what are all the other types of revenues that can be generated from this project, and use those to offset any cost that we have, so that there is not a burden on the property taxpayer. But, you know, the main thing we can do at this point, because we haven't crunched the numbers and this is all very preliminary, is we could make a commitment that everything that we're going to go into, that we're going to discuss, we're going to go into with open eyes, and we're going to be transparent about it, so that, you know, everything that we're talking about is out there for the public and the board to see and weigh against all the different benefits of this project. And that's something that we're intending to do.
Thanks, Randy. All right, next is John Robzinski, and then Natalia Pogrebna.
Good evening, John Rybczynski. I would just like to know, in the interim, we're going to have to increase police, fire, municipal workers to get to the tax revenue that is going to be generated. How are we going to bear that until we start getting that revenue? It's kind of like a two-part question. Also, since we're talking about the quality of life, we have put 3 dog care centers on right next to my area, within 70 yards of my house. My quality of life has been taxed all summer long. Now, the board doesn't do anything. We've gone to the village. How can you assure me that if you can't look out for my area, that you're going to look out for the hundreds of people that this is going to affect?
Okay,
Thank you.
Well, I know the dog issue we just dealt with at our last board meeting. I'll let the village manager address that. But certainly, that's part of the process where we need to know what your issues are so that we can address them. So thank you for bringing those issues forward. I'll let the village manager.
Yeah, you know what, on the dog issue, the place in question has been cited, is going to administrative adjudication. They are, we were asked, and they are conducting an acoustic study, and the village has the ability to impose measures on them up to and including eliminating the outdoor dog area. And these are all things that we're discussing currently with them to make sure that we can maintain the quality of life in that area. As to the issue about the costs of police and fire and so forth, we don't know yet what the impacts on police and fire and our other services are going to be. That is part of what we're going to be studying. It's part of what we're, again, talking to other communities about. You know, what did you have to do with your police and fire services and so forth? We don't know yet, and we're going to be studying, you know, are these things that pop up just on game and event days, or is there a permanent presence? So these are all part of what we're going to be looking at, and those are all the expenses that need to be offset by revenues generated from the site. And so it's a great question, but both of these things aren't going to happen overnight. You know, when any facility or development is built, the village will start collecting revenue on those right away. But at the same time, they understand that, you know, we are, you know, we pay for things with taxes, and so this project will have to generate taxes if they want to receive services. And so that's part of what we're looking at here for sure.
Thank you. Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Randy, it wasn't on the agenda, but since the resident brought it up, I'd like to just ask a question. Is Pet Suites still allowing animals out in their outside area?
Yes.
Has anybody from staff gone there early in the morning to see the level of that noise since the complaints have been brought up?
My understanding is yes. I believe that we've had police and I think health or building inspectors go there, and I don't want to put the chief on the spot, but is that his understanding? Yes.
And is the noise level, as the residents are saying?
You know, I can't, like I said, I think some of this we're trying they were cited, and so that gives you an indication of how the staff members that went there felt about it.
Okay.
And so they are in administrative adjudication because they found that it was a violation. Now, whether that bears out in adjudication and whether or not they can mitigate those issues prior to, you know, on their own, that's what we're trying to work out.
Well, and I'm just wondering why we can't bring it all inside and stop them from that noise on the outside until we figure this out.
You know, one of the issues is they have contractual relationships with a number of customers for having outdoor time at certain times of the day. And so we're hoping to be able to resolve all of this so that they don't have to break contractual obligations and we can address the needs of our residents.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, last blue card I have is from Natalia Pogrebna. Natalia, did I get your last name right?
Did. Good evening. My name is Natalia Pogrebna, and I'm a local business owner in Rolling Meadows. Thank you for your presentation and for everything you're doing to bring this exciting development to reality. My question is, will there be some sort of set-asides for local businesses once this, you know, development comes to fruition. For example, in Chicago with the casino, the city had set-asides for women-owned businesses, local businesses, and minority businesses. So would that be similar structure here?
Okay. Do you guys want to take that?
I think the short answer is I believe so. The Bears did talk about their DEI efforts, and they have a DEI coordinator who is working on that and has been reaching out to us about identifying minority and women-owned business owners in the general area that they can partner with. That would be logical partners for them on their effort. And so I don't know the details of that, but they have stated that something like that is something that's consistent with the values of their organization and that they want to explore with this project.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Natalia.
Hello, Melissa Kerr speaking. If the Bears back out, will the escrow funds be reimbursed by the village to the Bears?
Mr. Ecklouse?
No, the Bears have to, they are reimbursing us as we go, and this is not unlike, we do have other situations in the village where if we have to take on some type of extraordinary cost outside of our normal business operations in order to review a project, it's not terribly uncommon for us to charge that to an applicant, and that's just something that it's a cost of doing business for them as they go forward.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Melissa. All right, those are all the blue cards I have. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address the board on this agenda item? I'm seeing none. Come forward if you would. Just give us your name if you would.
Hi, I'm Marie Bush. I just have a quick question about the property taxes, and I know the village has been working to keep theirs down, but it's such a small part of what we're paying in total. So is there any possibility that there would be any decrease in like the school taxes, which are the biggest part, that could come about from this whole development?
Well, I'm glad you pointed that out because I'm not sure everyone knows that the village portion of your property tax bill is only about 12%. And so as the individual indicated, most of your property taxes go to the school districts, about 65%. And so that's one reason I always tell the kids when I talk to the elementary school kids that I show them the pie chart and I say that's why we have such high quality education in Arlington Heights, because your parents and the taxpayers are willing to pay for it. But that's a really good question. I don't know, Mr. Ecklouse, do you have
I think it's just too soon to say whether or not something like that would be possible. It's just I think it's a point well taken, and it's something that, again, the sensitivity on property taxes is something we share and that we've shared, with the Bears organization, but it's too soon to say whether or not something like that could be.
Trustee Bertucci.
The only other thing I would just want to add to what you both have added is, as many people know, that they are separate tax bodies, and for lack of better words, they make their own decisions as far as what their levies are and how they tax. But you may already know that or realize that. Okay, so.
Okay. All right, anybody else in the, Trustee Grasse?
Thank you, President Hayes. I would just like to make a couple of comments as one of the newer trustees here on the board. First off, thank you for all of the residents and businesses who have reached out to us with their personal emails of concern and thoughts about this. We do take all of those emails and comments very seriously. And so I just thank you for those individual comments that you do give us. Please keep doing that. What I was hoping to do is just give an overall reassurance, just as one of the newer trustees, first in how united the board is in taking seriously your concerns and what best benefits our community, what will make us a good neighbor to our neighboring communities, and how we can work together with whatever this development may be. I am just so grateful to be a part of this board who really takes seriously what is best for our community, as you elected all of us to do. And I also just wanted to give reassurances at the impressive nature of our staff and the leadership in thinking about things that we don't even yet know about, being open and willing to look at what's happening and get the appropriate professionals to also give additional advice, but just really take everything in. This is so complex and big and bold of a development. And I just want to give some reassurances that the best interests of our village are at the core of everything that we are doing for you. So thank you.
If nothing further from the board or the audience, let me just thank you all for attending tonight. Trustee Tinaglia, I'm sorry, with your Chicago Bears tie on.
Yeah, it's a Hershey tie, actually. Don't tell anybody. I wanted to piggyback on Trustee Grasse's comment that I'm committed, as I've been, and as I mentioned even last week, all of this, everything that we do and the predecessors before us here, we are so blessed to have the kinds of horsepower and education, the ability to make decisions. Getting educated, getting informed, listening, paying attention, studying, what we have available to us by virtue of all of those things is more than a lot of other communities take advantage of. And some of them are sitting here in the audience, some of them are behind the scenes here, but all of these folks that I'm lucky to sit with take it very seriously. And we're all residents, and we all give a darn about everything that we do. So my goal is to take this one step at a time, handle those two things here this fall that are ultimately most important right now, dive into this thing after that, and if the Bears do go forward, I'm going to be a big cheerleader for them, but I'm also going to be one of their biggest critics. I want to make this project so fantastic that not just the residents that are here now, but generations to come are proud of what this board did and what all of our employees worked so hard to make happen. So that's my commitment to you folks, to all of us right now. I'm gonna work hard to make it happen, and I'm gonna work hard to make it as perfect as we possibly can. And if it can't be that, then I don't want to do it.
All right. Thanks, Trustee Tinaglia. Well, again, thank you for joining us tonight and being part of the process. We moved to this location because we didn't know how many people to expect. And so we could have done it at Village Hall, it turns out, but you have the distinction of being the first residents, the first members of the public who were involved in a formal meeting before the village board on this issue. So when the stadium or whatever gets built there, however many years down the road, you can tell your kids, your grandkids, that you were part of the first formal meeting and involved in the political process. And so thank you for your input. Thank you for joining us tonight. Have a great rest of the evening. Any further business?
Move adjourned.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Trustee Bertucci, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all again for joining us tonight.
Stated policy to treat every customer as an honored guest. And that goes for all customers, those looking to buy a new or used car, those stopping by the all-new Quick Lane Tire and Auto Center for routine maintenance for all makes and models, or those just looking for a smiling face to brighten their day. As a result, we are the only Ford dealer in the country to win Ford's exclusive President's Award for customer satisfaction for 21 consecutive years. At Arlington Heights Ford, we are #1 in what matters most, customer satisfaction